All right,
It's
we're live.
weird. It's weird.
Hey, Ian, you're blinking off and on green, man.
He's a green man.
I'm having trouble with this camera.
Ah, okay.
All right, we're live.
It's weird.
Hey, Ian,
Oh.
you're blinking off and on green.
Oh, sorry about that.
Where's my phone? There it is.
There you go. All right. Well, here we are live. I got a full house. Me and 6 others, as you can tell. You know, I got Robert, Ian, Gary, Nick, Mark, and Alex.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
So this time we're going to talk about the year 1983. Now we're into the 80s. I noticed when I was picking my choices that 1980 and 81 and part of 82 kind of had remnants of the 70s, but then once 83 rolled around, that kind of like disappeared. At least from how I noticed it. So I'm going to start off with my first choice, and I'm basing it on how it first came to me, and it's Zebra, the self-titled one. They've been it's a trio out of Louisiana, and they have been people kind of complain that they sounded a little like Led Zeppelin at times, but I can hear that. I guess it's because of the lead singer's voice, Randy Jackson, but this one has a lot of hits on it and a lot of deep cuts. I mean, the hits are "Tell Me What You Want," "One More Chance," "Take Your Fingers from My Hair," and then the deep cuts was a cover of the Beatles song "Slow Down." I think it was the Beatles that originally, and then the La La song, which was basically La La. Um, I first got into them when I saw the cover on a cassette in the record store, and I was like going, that looks pretty interesting. And I blindly bought it. I think I was 1983, 84, somewhere in that time period. I didn't buy it on release day because back then, unless you were really following the magazines heavily, you never really knew release dates.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first pick.
That's my first concert, actually. There's a thing called the Taste of Chicago now. Back then, it was called Chicago Fest, and it was done in Soldier Field, where the Bears play. And my cousin wanted to see who's Sammy Hagar, and who opened for him? Zebra. So I saw them, I think, when I was my first concert at 10 years old. So there you go.
Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video, and someone made that comment. Maybe it was you.
It's probably me.
Yeah, now that would have been a great concert to see. I wish, back then I really wasn't a concert goer.
Yeah, right.
Didn't happen to the mid 80s.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's so that one has a special place in my heart, and I got to see them live at Rosfest. So it didn't make my list, but it could have.
Yeah, great band. I saw them twice, once at Rosfest and once in a small nightclub back in the 80s. I think one of their later albums had just come out.
I think that was 3.V or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, Robert, you're up.
Thank you. Okay, well, let me start with a Canadian band, Saga, and their album Heads or Tails. It's their fifth studio album. It's an excellent record with many hits on it, including The Flyer, Catwalk, Social Orphan, and a very, very popular Scratching the Surface, featuring Jim Gilmore on vocals. That album was produced by Rupert Hines, the guy who produced Rush, Tina Turner, The Fix, Stevie Nicks, and many more. And with this disc in particular, we saw the strange phenomenon of this Canadian band being vastly more popular in Europe than at home. Heads or Tails was a gold record in Canada with 50,000 records sold. But in Germany, it sold over 250,000 copies.
Wow.
Wow.
It's one of my favorite because it's the first Saga album I ever purchased. And this is the original copy from way back then.
Oh, wow. Cool. All right, Gary, you're up.
Okay, I'm going to go, mine are in no particular order, except the last one I'll do when we get to it will be the number one pick for the year. But my first one is Hawkwind Zones. And, this album is probably not one of Hawkwind's best albums, but I'm just such a Hawkwind fanatic that kind of anything they put out, I fall in love with. And it does have some really, really good songs on it. It's just, it also has some redos, which I don't know if you guys follow Hawkwind at all, but they like to redo a lot of their songs, multiple different versions. So there's some, there's a new version of Sonic Attack and stuff. But it's just a really good album. I really enjoy it. It's in rotation to this day for me. So.
All right. Nick, you're up.
Me? Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. I looked at that list and I got to tell you that over the years, I've owned at least 80% of the stuff on that list. And sometimes more than once. I'd buy it on a CD. I originally bought it on vinyl. And then I'd buy it on vinyl again because I'd loan my copy out or something. I don't do that anymore. So one of my favorites was a track that I discovered on MTV by Paul Young. And this is the album right here, No Paralyze. This is a music on vinyl reissue. Stunning reissue. But the main track that I heard was Come Back and Stay. And I just loved the emotion and feel that Paul Young created when he was up on the cliff singing out, about a lost love. There's quite a few other hits on this album, but that was probably my favorite. I think there's a cover on this album as well. But he also went on to being in Mike and Mechanics, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And so is there anyone that knows me knows that I like everything from punk to heavy metal to prog to classical to Baroque. So my list tonight is going to be very varied. There's going to be stuff on here that on my list. There's going to be stuff that's not on my list that I would love to have put on my list. But when you only have 5 to choose from, I decided to really kind of do various different categories. So I'm staying.
I figured I kept it at 5 because I think if we would have gone to, let's say, 10, I think
5 is more than enough.
Yeah, we would be here into the night. So
yeah.
All right, Ian, you're up.
Okay, let's see if we can have the camera working or not. I'm going with an album by Art Zoid, L'espace in Cuits, which is, I think, their 5th album. They're a French avant-garde chamber experimental band, part of the rock and opposition scene. I don't think they were in the original rock and opposition grouping, but they were in the second lineup of those bands. All of their first 5 or 6 albums are pretty much classic. They tail off a little after this one. There's a couple after this one which are very good. There's a Nosferatu soundtrack that's particularly well regarded. Great band. I got to see them on their 44th year anniversary in 2015. So they've been around a long time. Good band. Art Zoid. That's my first pick.
Not heard of that, but I'm definitely going to check it out.
It's an acquired taste. They're quite good, but they're definitely avant-garde.
I like avant-garde.
All right, Mark, you're up.
Okay. So this is kind of an odd list for me today, but I'm starting with, I actually tried to put the background behind me, but the album is mostly white. It came out in March of 1983. This is the first year I was buying CDs. I don't know. I just to give a little background. In 1983, did anybody else buy CDs before they owned a CD player? That was 1983 for me. So I did that with DVDs and CDs and Blu-rays. I always bought something beforehand. So anyhow, the album I really liked was, and it was kind of vindicated by Nick DiVirgilio becoming a touring member, was Tears for Fears, and the Hurting is a great album. And I fell in love with a video, Mad World, and I used to kind of dance like the guy dancing on there. And I just thought it's good memories. 83, I'm 12 years old and I'm just starting to get into music this year. So
Great album.
yeah.
Have you seen the video with him and his daughter doing it during the pandemic?
No.
Oh, unbelievable. Go check it out.
It's a fun video, and then
is.
dance along with it if you check out the original anyway too. So, and that's it for me. And I think that leads us to who's left? Ian?
Nope,
I'll back
Alex.
Alex. Oh yeah, Alex. There we go.
So I'm going to lose probably some of my cred with this, but the Fix, Reach the Beach.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Great
Right.
album. Great.
That was on my list, but I couldn't use it.
I really like the guitar player in the Fix, and it turns out the bass player, Danny, I've forgotten his last name, but he started off playing in a jazz fusion band called Isotope in the late 70s. He was on Isotope's Deep End album. So I think there's some subtle, pretty interesting music stuff going on there.
Right.
That was more than just the straight up pop that you might think of. So, and I listened to that album a lot in the 80s. I gave up on music around 1980, right around this time, 1982. And I stopped looking for anything new. And so, I heard this on the radio and I was really quite surprised. So anyways, that's my first choice for now.
All right. Well, back to me. My second choice is kind of based on MTV and also my very limited exposure to the band 2 years prior. When they put out Classic Yes, that little compilation, I bought that on cassette, and then when MTV rolled around, I got this one.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
From
Yeah.
the Reagan era.
Yeah. It was, I still hear to this day how some people don't like where Yes went in the 80s. And okay, I can get that to a certain point, but you got to do something different. You can't do the same albums over and over and over again. No matter, you'll lose some, some fans that way, but if the band really wants to see what the band's going to do next, they'll stick around. And there's a lot of great songs on there, a lot of great music videos like that. Leave It, where they're doing all those weird things going on, where they're flipping around, zoning in and out.
There's actually like 20 versions of that. And there's a great video on that.
I actually watched 20 about a year or two ago. Mm-hmm. When we were in the height of the pandemic. I just thought, well, what the hell, just to watch some videos. And I watched all 20, and I'm like going, I watched the video where the guy was explaining them, and so that piqued my interest. So then I watched all of them, and I'm like going, okay, I like the song, but I'm getting a little tired of, so I'm gonna put that on the back burner for quite a few years. But then when I went to go listen to it for this, kind of did a little bit with fresh ears. I like just about every song on here.
Yeah.
The I mean, obvious, the hit "Owner of a Lonely Heart." I mean, that's good, but I think there's better songs on there, including that instrumental "Cinema," which that was originally what they were supposed to be called until the record
right.
label interceded with, and same thing happened with King Crimson. They was in the 80s, they were supposed to be called Discipline. Then the record labels kind of nudged them to put it out. I mean, there's been so many instances where the record company meddles with bands, and artists. So this is my second pick.
Cool.
Yep.
Great
Robert.
choice.
All right. Okay. Well, my next album is the Eurythmics. 1983 was a really, really busy year for the pop duo Eurythmics with their second and their third studio albums, both of which brought hit after hit. Of course, their second studio album was entitled "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This." Everybody knows that one. And it was one of the biggest albums of that era. But I want to talk about their third album, which was released at the end of 1983, "Touch" by Eurythmics. It's a brilliant synth pop album by the Annie Lennox, Dave Stewart duo. It's Touch has one of my favorite tracks of Eurythmics, "Here Comes the Rain Again." It's a powerful, catchy ballad. It also had "Right by Your Side" and "Who's That Girl?" Not to be confused with the Madonna track of the same name. I seriously think that Annie Lennox is one of the finest female vocalists of all times, with her powerful melodic delivery. What a voice.
Great.
Great album.
There you go.
Did you know that before they were the Rhythmics, they were called the Tourists, and they did 2 albums?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
No.
check them out. I've got one of the 2, and I think I got their debut, and it's just a stunning album.
Yeah, I listened to on YouTube the Eurythmics debut album. It's kind of way different than the second and the third. I mean, but it's just kind of neat to listen to some of those bands when they first start out and how they evolve. All right, Gary, you're up.
Okay, my next one is one a lot of people don't like, "Dada" by Alice Cooper.
Great album.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I wasn't too crazy about, I'm a big Alice Cooper fan, but I wasn't too crazy about the albums that came right before this. And to me, it was moving away from a lot of his sort of creepy stuff, which I really like. And he brought back a lot of the moody sort of stuff on this one, I think largely because of Bob Ezrin, but it's just such a good album. Not everything on here's a monster, but most of them are, and there aren't any songs I skip on it. It's a really good album.
All right, Nick, you're up.
Okay, so this band, when they first arrived on the scene, they were considered a punk band. They were actually a jazz, pop, reggae band, but they weren't a punk band. And so those of you that don't know, they were called the Police.
Mhm.
And this is their final album.
Oh, yeah.
This comes out of the box set. It's a remastered at Abbey Road Studio that came out about 2 years ago. I've had this album, I don't know how many times. There's actually 64, before the box set, there was 64 different variations of this. What they did is each time that they did a pressing, there was the photographs were in different orientation on the album, between front and back, and the same with the colors. And 2 of them were really rare, and I had those as well. It took me like 2 years, 3 years to get all of them. It was really hard.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, the catalog number doesn't give you a different catalog number. They just did it random. And there was a bronze version with bronze colored stripes, and then there was a black and white with no color stripes on it. But this was their final album, studio album, and it's called Synchronicity. It had loads of hits on it, and featured 3.
I got the box set.
Yeah, that's a great box set. That's the one that's out of 3 of the best musicians out there. I mean, Andy Summers, who has played with Mike Oldfield and the Animals. Sting was, God, everyone knows who Sting is, right?
His first band was a fusion band, Sting's band.
Yeah.
He was a jazz player in Newcastle.
So, I mean, this album, I saw their tour in Georgia, and the Go-Go's were the opening band on the tour. And I think it was their finest album. It's not my favorite album, but I think it's their finest. My favorite album by them is Regatta de Blanc.
Stuart Copeland went on to do some great work, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Everything from Clark Kent to soundtracks to, in fact, he's just reimagined the work of the Police with a classical orchestra that they just, now you can order it. So it's
yeah, my favorite of his was the soundtrack to Rumblefish.
Oh yeah.
Great album. I have that as well.
Great album, great movie. I mean, that was just the most, for when they went to doing black and white, because black and white was just a thing of the past at that point, and then to do it that movie that way just made the movie that much better.
Yeah, black and white represented the depressing current, and the color represented the future.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Ian, you're up.
Okay, going back to some avant-garde, I'm going with Eschaton. They're a French Zoul band. This is their 3rd album, I think, Fiction. They started out in the 70s, basically followed on the Magma model of how to make Zoul music.
Yeah.
Very small group. This is actually a reissue on Soleil Zoul, the Paris label that came out a few years ago. If you're into that heavy fuzz bass, chanting vocals, avant noise type stuff, good band to check out. Their actual favorite before that is Four Visions is my favorite by them. That was their debut.
Yeah, mine too, Ian. Mine too.
Very worthy album.
Very good stuff.
All right, Mark.
All righty, I got it on my wall. I moved up Synchronicity to this one as well. I'll just confirm what Nick said. He said it more eloquently and knows more about the album than I do. But I will say that I really enjoyed the video, and it's back in the day. It was a longer form and just some great production value. And it's another, when I was talking about last time, I was talking about synth pop doing a better job at innovating than progressive rock in 77. And I feel the same about 83 and punk rock maybe doing a better job innovating. And this was a good example of these guys. And of course, like I said, they're 3. They showed that punk rockers don't have to be just kind of guys that are playing motion and not technically savvy, right? These guys had the whole package. They're technically savvy and they were playing punk rock. And I didn't like any punk rock after until Green Day, really. So there you go.
I got to say, I like Bad Brains.
Oh, well, Bad Brains. Yeah.
All right, Alex, you're up.
So you guys all know that I really like Hugh Hopper quite a bit. So Hugh Hopper and Richard Sinclair did an album together called Somewhere in France.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good. It's got a nice intersection between edgy and melodic. And I really, when I didn't get this till the 90s, so I heard it long after it was released. But I was really surprised to hear Hugh Hopper involved in different projects like this. And I've always enjoyed whatever Hugh has been involved in. He's done all kinds of things. Electronic avant-garde stuff, straight up fusion stuff. He was in Soft Machine back in the 70s and the late 60s. And so I always thought he always did something interesting. So, and this is from the Canterbury school of, I wouldn't call it prog, I'd call it more instrumental. Not quite fusion, but pretty damn close. But it's I think a really good album. So
Another one I got to check out now.
All right. All right. I'm up again. And at around this time, I kind of started touching into the metal scene, but not fully into it. MTV had a big influence on me, Headbangers Ball, if you guys remember that one.
oh yeah.
And I got Iron Maiden Peace of Mind.
Album.
Again, this is another one that no duds on it. I mean, obviously we know The Trooper and but everything else, I mean, my favorite on here is Still Life. I don't know, it just had that mystical spookiness to it that, and I was reading that there's two sources from this, but then it's very vague as to which one. And I just like the idea of, it's like the person is staring down into this pool and something is, kind of paraphrasing what Bruce sings. It's beckoning the person, and then telling that person, got to bring your partner too. It's I think I remember seeing, I want to say it's an episode of Twilight Zone where they jumped into that pool and they went to somewhere else. So it just has that really mystical feeling to it. And that's whenever I put this album on, I got to listen to that song first, but all the rest are great, To Tame a Land, Sun and Steel, Die With Your Boots On, Where Eagles Dare. That's a great opening track. So that's what I got here for my number 2.
Yeah, I
Number
remember
3,
that Twilight
excuse me.
Zone. I remember that Twilight Zone. It was 2 kids wanted to escape their parents, so they dive in the pool and end up somewhere else.
Yeah, it was pretty trippy.
Yeah, a
All
long
right,
time.
Alex.
The thing that was great about Maiden is and there are bands out there right now that a second vocalist came in and actually made them better.
Right.
And they were one of the few that the fans actually accepted someone, and they did and Dickinson definitely took them to another level.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
first, with the first 2, it had, going back to the
Paul
punk
Di'Anno.
thing.
It was
Yeah, it
more
had
punk.
He had a
Certainly
more punk attitude
Yeah.
to it, and the songs were a little more punchier, and they had more melodic stuff too. But the songs, they were punchy. They were like like this, and but like you said, Bruce took it to another level, and this style of heavy metal, the new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, it just refined what Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, all those bands were doing in the 70s. It just kind of refined it. And I think Iron Maiden is as close to prog metal and most of those other bands, because they were doing different things, subtly. The fans, some of the metalheads probably didn't notice it, but people that were paying more attention to it noticed it.
Yeah, they've done a few albums that were very progressive oriented, but were not prog, like
Power Slave.
Power Slaves, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, I love this one, but if I had to pick an album to go to from the 80s, is Power Slave.
Good choice.
Cool.
Cheers.
All right, Robert.
Okay, well, my next album, Alpha by Asia. It's a really good follow-up to their monster debut, but nowhere near as original, catchy, and memorable as the first one. There were a few songs worth mentioning, like "Don't Cry," the Smile Has Left Your Eyes, both of which were singles, along with "True Colors" and "The Heat Goes On," which kind of recaptures a bit the energy of the first album. The funny thing is that "Don't Cry" was actually a last-minute addition by the record company to give the album a commercial pop hit. Worked. The mixing on it is kind of busy. It's a bit chaotic at times. The vocals just don't come off as punchy as the first album. It's the last Asia album featuring the original lineup of Wetton, Palmer, Howe, and Downs. Well, at least in the 20th century. And as per usual, it features stunningly beautiful artwork by Roger.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
All right, Gary.
Okay, so I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan. I mean, they're probably my second favorite band, and I like it. Tony Iommi's the king of the riff, so anything Tony does, I'm all about it. And this one, Born Again, was a very unpopular album in a lot of ways. But to me, I remember when I first bought it, when it was brand new in the store, and I put it on. And, it's hard to hear it now with the ears of modern era, but man, that thing was just so heavy and hard. And it was like, I hadn't heard anything quite like it before. And of course, it's the only album with Ian Gillan on vocals, which I think is a sticking point for some people. I don't think they really cared for him in the band, and his lyrics were obviously not the typical stuff you get with Black Sabbath songs, but I still think it's a really amazing album. There's not a song that I don't like on here. There's no songs I don't like on here. Everything's just so good.
I like Zero the Hero is my favorite on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget Digital Bitch, man.
Yeah. I saw that performed at the Reading Rock Festival in 82 or 83. It must have been 83. Saw them at 83.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man,
it was
awesome.
Phenomenal. Yeah,
That would have been awesome.
Gillan didn't know any of the words to the Sabbath song, so he had them on big sheets of paper on the stage.
Right.
And the dry ice kept rolling across it, so he couldn't see the words.
Yeah, I saw. I saw the interviews on YouTube where he talked about it in recollection, and I mean, yeah, like you said, it wasn't a great pairing, but when I first heard that, I mean, years later, like I'm gonna say about 3, maybe 4 years later, I heard that, and I was like going, that at that point I was in the thrash metal sound, and I was like going, this is kind of akin to thrash metal in a way, just the slow, it almost feels like it was a steamroller kind of rolling over you, and just so, and I played that for a friend of mine, and he lost track of Black Sabbath, when Dio was in the band. When he heard Dio was out, he was out. So and when I played that for him, he goes, "Damn, this is heavy."
I think all their incarnations, even with Tony Martin, was great.
Oh yeah.
But I remember when I first heard that, it felt like you were getting hit in the head.
It was real heavy, real
Compared
heavy.
to anything else that had come out to that point,
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Nick.
Oh, okay. So this man has probably discovered more talent than anyone out there, and has had probably more releases than most people. And his name is Frank Zappa. And the album I picked from 1983 was The Man from Utopia.
Yes.
Now, some of you may remember the big hit off of here, Cocaine Decisions, which was really quite amazing. But what was amazing about this album is it featured a lot of great musicians like Steve Vai, Ray White, Bob Harris, of course, and 2 amazing drummers, Chad Wackerman and Vinnie Colaiuta. They don't get any bigger and better than those guys. I mean, because those guys, I mean, I've seen Vinnie Colaiuta with in death metal bands. I've seen him in jazz bands. I've seen him in pop bands, and then prog bands. I mean, the guy's everywhere, right? So I can't even tell you how many albums that Zappa had up to this point. I mean, I started to count, and every time I'd count, I'd lose my space because there's so many of them, you know. And the same with his vocalists. There's so many great musicians. Like this one featured Ike Willis, probably one of my favorite Frank Zappa vocalists out there. Yeah, if you're a Frank Zappa fan, this is definitely a must. Kind of went under the radar minus the song Cocaine Decisions. But great album.
All right, Ian.
I'm going to go with my next choice with Mr. Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Oh, yes, big time.
This was his debut album in '83. He kind of burst onto the scene with the Texas blues. It really kind of reinvigorated my interest in the blues. Yeah, he played the Reading Rock Festival. I don't know if it was the same one as the Sabbath one, but it was in that 2-year window I went. He played there. Cracking album, a lot of good songs on there. Love Struck Baby, Pride and Joy, Texas Flood. It's just all upbeat, high tempo blues, good rocking music. Guy left way too early. Stevie Ray Vaughan.
You know, that was one of my biggest regrets concert wise is we had half price vouchers to go to the concert at Alpine Valley. And we're sitting around in my house and we're like, well, if we get there now, we probably won't catch Buddy Guy, but we can see Stevie. Stevie's always touring. We'll go get a chance to see him headlining instead. And so we just stayed and barbecued and, you know, everything. And then the next morning I wake up and find out he died. And it's like, oh my God, that was the last chance to see him.
Wow. Yeah, I got to say, I watched the videos on YouTube and I'm pretty impressed. It's just amazing how much music can come out of one instrument.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's some good documentary on him as well.
All right, Mark, you're up.
All right, cool. I'll mention too that Kevin Gilbert taught me to never miss a band. So, because I found out about him after he was gone, and so I make it a priority to see bands if at all possible. I do get lazy though sometimes, I have to say. The next album I have for you is, you can kind of see it on my background. A guy named Kitaro. He's got an album called India from 1983. And when I found this album, I really thought this is amazing. And then of course he ends up working with John Anderson on another album that I can't think of at this moment. But actually now this I see here 85 release, but I saw somewhere else 83. Anybody know? Because the back is all black on black now. It's so old. But I'll list it anyway here in case I might be wrong about the year. So just some great Japanese inspired instrumental music, and something that I was never looking for. When I heard it, I loved it. I bought it, and that's my story. That's my story with Kitaro and that album.
Amazing musician.
Yeah.
He started off in a prog band from Japan called the Far East Family Band.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good
Yeah.
stuff.
All right, Alex, you're up.
My next one is going to be Tangerine Dream, Hypoborea.
Nice.
I know Ian also just.
We got common taste. We're in the same place.
This was an era when they were kind of switching over from what they were doing in the 70s to something that was a little more maybe dreamy or melodic in the 80s, but it never really got that far off track, and I really enjoyed this. It's an album I can sit and listen to for hours and hours. The thing about Tangerine Dream is the music mutates a lot over time, so it takes someone with some patience to listen to it.
Right.
But this is definitely one of their best. Unfortunately, I had a chance to see them in 77 and in, was it 90? I think it was 90. But for some reason, I missed the 77 one and the 90. In the 90s, they really got kind of too, not the words new agey, but they were a little off the edge for me. They weren't really that interesting anymore.
Right.
I hear they're coming back again here soon, and they have it's Edgar Froese's son is playing,
Well,
and the new stuff is actually quite good. So
Cool. All right. My next choice, and it's not the first time I heard them, but when I went back through the catalog, I really liked it. And it's Marillion Script for a Jester's Chair.
I wanted to pick that, but I knew everyone else would probably pick that.
Well, what I like it, but well, I have the deluxe one, and I also have you remember when EMI did the jewel case ones where each album had a letter on it? I still have those too. I mean, because they had there's some tracks on there on the bonus CD that I don't think are on this one, but
it's this copy.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I still have that one. I'm gonna hold on to that for a little longer, but I really like, going to this one, especially since it's got the Blu-ray on it. You can pop it in your machine and put on your headsets and, just,
Is it in 5.1?
I believe so.
Ah, excellent.
And of course it got all the discs. I mean, there's Pivot the Marquis,
That is gorgeous.
and the booklet, which is so cool, pictures and whatnot. A lot of great songs on here, the title track, Chelsea Monday, which is one of my favorites off of here. A lot of people I've been seeing where they say a lot of people aren't fond of the first two albums for some reason, because they're kind of almost kind of rough around the edges in a way.
I think it's their best work.
Yeah, and their follow-up for this, it was rough around the edges, but that's what made it work. Especially with Fish singing, he's got a very aggressive voice. And but yeah, if you get a chance, I mean, I got this one and then the follow-up in this format. I'm trying to locate for a decent price the one that I started with, Misplaced Childhood, and then Clutching at Straws. But they're, my biggest gripe with record labels, whether they're big or small, when they release cool things like this, they release it in such a limited run that once they go out, someone buys 2 copies, puts it in their library, one, and then the other one, they put it up on fucking eBay for twice or 3 times the amount that it's worth. And it makes it difficult for people that didn't get a chance to buy it the first time around. And I kind of wish that some of these labels would clue on this. It's like, well, wait a second, we're not getting that money that this, eBay seller number, whatever, he's getting $100 for this. We put it out and it was 30 to 40. So where's our $60? So they could, I mean, I understand, since Nick is a label person, it costs money. I understand that. But if the popularity behind it will warrant it, do it. I mean, there's a ton of Marillion fans out there that probably don't even have this one, and this one probably soon to be out of print. It's kind of ridiculous, but I understand both sides.
Cool.
The cool thing about Marillion, I discovered them in NME before they ever even had a record out. And they were the very first band to ever headline a major outdoor festival, which was the Reading Festival, and as an unsigned band. Now that's a feat that no one else that I know of in history's ever done. I'm sure there's probably others. They're the only ones that I'm aware of.
I saw them at Reading. I saw them at Reading in '82 or '83.
Yep. And they were also the very first unsigned band to ever play the Marquee.
Marquee was a great venue.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's two really cool firsts right there, right off the bat.
They were huge fast. They got so much publicity really fast.
And I thought the EP before the two albums was fantastic. Market Square Heroes was
Market Square
phenomenal.
Heroes.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that was really an album length, but it was only 3 tracks, so they called it an EP, which is properly done, but great album.
Was that the one that had Grendel on it?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And 3 boats down from Candy, and
I saw Marillion opening for Rush a long time ago. They were on their Misplaced Childhood tour. That was amazing. Pretty cool.
I saw them headline that 2 or 3 times.
That's where I came in to them because, again, an MTV, thanks to MTV, back when they, obviously when they were playing the videos, but then at that point where they were playing a little bit more unique and out there kind of videos, I think I want to say almost the late 80s, they were just playing either the hits or, you had Headbangers Ball, like I mentioned, or that alternative 120 minutes, things like that. But they never had anything that was interesting in between.
All right.
Gary.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of makes sense for me to go in this order this time, even though we're switching around, just because I'm going to go ahead and do my number 1 album for the year, which is the same as you just picked.
Right.
And my story behind that, kind of like you, I got into Misplaced Childhood. I was working at a record store, and one of the guys who worked there had heard about it, and we opened up a copy and played it. And I was like, oh my God, this is like Peter Gabriel era Genesis, it was amazing to me. And so I got into that one, and then I started going back. And to this day, I mean, I know the new Marillion with Hogarth, they've released tons of stuff, and it's all really good, but it doesn't touch the Fish era stuff for me at all. Right. And the 2 favorites of mine are Misplaced Childhood and Script for a Jester's Tear, which I think they're both equally amazing albums. At least I like all the Fish era stuff, and I like the later stuff too. But yeah, so I mean, I think we kind of talked about Marillion, but yeah, that's sort of how I came.
How many of you feel that Marillion should have changed their name when they got H in the band?
And it's less about the singer change. There's just a change of the sound of the band.
Yeah, the music kind of.
Yeah,
but I think the music fits the vocalist.
Yeah, that's true
too. Because Hogarth didn't have that aggressive voice.
Quality, that cinematic quality, it's sort of lost to some degree.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's different, That's all.
It's like 2 different bands.
It took me a while.
I have all the stuff from both eras, but I still think that when they changed, when they got a new vocalist that wasn't going to sound like,
right.
I mean, you get bands and you get a vocalist that like Davidson who tries to emulate Anderson, right?
Right.
That's one thing to keep the name, but it's another thing to take, and go from a metal singer to an opera singer, right? Or
right.
I mean, Hogarth came from he came from a punk band.
Right.
So I really thought that the first album was Leftover Marillion, but with Fish, but after that, I think they should have just moved on. But hey, it's all good.
Yeah,
It's their choice. What they think it's the name it should be under. That's their choice. So
of course,
Yeah. They tried to kill Floyd when he left, didn't he? But they kept going with the name.
Yeah.
He lost that case.
Yeah.
I think you're back to Robert now, aren't you?
Yeah, on to me. All right.
Well, actually, no, it's Ian's turn.
No, we skipped.
No.
We skipped
You
Robert.
skipped Robert.
It went to me, so we should get Robert now.
Okay.
You
All right,
forgot
Robert.
about Bob.
Oh.
What about Bob?
What about
Well,
Bob?
Ah,
great movie.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my next album is Robert Plant's The Principle of Moments. It's the second solo album by the ex-singer of Zeppelin. Plant's solo album sounded nothing like the hard rock of his former band, and aligned with the synth pop rock that was so popular in the mid-80s. Among the big hits on this disc, you had Big Log, funny name,
Yeah.
Right.
Other Arms, and the very, very beautiful In the Mood.
Oh,
all of
yes.
which were released as singles. Big Lug being the most recognizable radio-friendly track on the album. Among the guest musicians accompanying Robert Plant on this album, you had Phil Collins on drum. And he also toured with the band for a short while.
That album,
Great album.
that album very nearly made my list. But then when I saw it was going to be on your list, I'm like, you know what? There's some other things that I like just about as much, so I'll just make a trade there.
Yeah, I probably should have done that with Ian's list as well.
No, you're all right.
Well,
I've got
you know-
backups. I've got backups.
Well,
I
to
wanted
me,
to put my list up in the chat with you guys, but I'm just so busy. I just didn't have time.
right.
In fact,
The first two Robert Plant albums, I don't know what it. I mean, it was really solid sounding, and like you were saying, it kind of in the synth pop, but then that song In the Mood with that bass, it was like it kind of reminded me that sound almost how the Fix's bass line goes, it just felt like it was in that same world.
It was kind of minimalist stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, great one. All right. Go to Nick.
Nick next.
right. There's a lot of great metal that came out back in the 80s and 70s. This band I don't really consider really as a heavy metal band, but a good solid hard rock band. But a lot of people will consider them heavy metal. And I'm talking about UFO.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I also consider this band probably one of the finest crooner bands. It takes a special kind of person that can just make ladies melt, and I gotta say, Phil Moggs got that voice that just even as a guy, I listen to him and he just makes me feel good. He just the way he just delivers the music. So the one that I picked was, of course, the one that came out in 1983. It's called Making Contact.
Oh yeah.
I've got a reissue double LP version, which is really nice. I don't know if you guys can see it because I keep covering my picture on the.
Yeah, we can see
it. This one came out on gold vinyl, it's a reissue, but I've had this a few times, and it was one of the other thing that I really loved about it is the artwork. Anyone remember Hypnosis?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're known for Steve Miller and, of course, Pink Floyd. Who doesn't know that, right? Thorgerson was one of my favorite artists. So when you take someone like this band, a great crooner, great music, great lyrics, great production, and a great artist, you've got a solid album. That's all I can tell you.
They have one of the finest. They have one of the finest live albums of all time. Their live album is absolutely phenomenal.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yep, saw that tour.
Oh, nice.
Definitely, I'm a big Paul Raymond fan. I'm may rest in peace, and Niall Carter and Paul Gray was great. Andy Parker, what a great drummer. Solid band.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Ian.
I'm going to go with Bacamarte. Devoir
Oh yeah.
de Fim.
Great
This is
band.
a Brazilian symphonic prog band. It's
Another one I
very
need to
much
find out about.
very classical 70s prog. If you're in the synth prog, these guys are in it in spades. Again, relatively short-lived band, lived through the 70s into the early 80s. I think they disbanded in something like 1984, but this is an absolute classic of that particular style of music. It's a bit of an out there rarity in terms of Brazilian prog, but yeah, big fan of this one. Makes a lot of people top 10 lists of non-UK synth. And that was mine. Mark?
So I decided that I was thinking, do I do script or not? I decided to do it. I decided that we on our radio station we have some DJs that they don't give best album to best song, and I always like, well, if it's the best one, then go ahead and give them 2 awards. Don't spread it around just for the sake of spreading it around. So I'm gonna say script as well, because it was one of the early things that I found out about when I started listening to prog. I forgot who mentioned they stopped listening to music. Maybe it was Gary, that they started listening on the radio.
No, it was me.
That was Alex.
Alex.
Sorry. So Alex, yeah. And I stopped. The last thing I heard on the radio was that I liked was "Tripping the Live Fantastic" by which was Paul McCartney in 1991. And after that, I stopped listening to the radio. And the first time I heard something that I really liked that somebody suggested was actually Porcupine Tree and then Marillion in this album. So it means a lot to me, this album and the band. And the Fish Area I happen to like better, but I don't have a religious conviction of that.
Right.
But I do like Fish's solo work as well. I follow him right through to The Field, and I can't remember the other one that has Goldfish and Clowns, the one before The Field, and I just really enjoyed it. And plus, I like him on Arion. I saw him sing live in Tilburg, so I just really enjoy that. And I'll end it there because we talked a lot
I do
about
notice the big Marillion artwork right behind you.
it. That's right. It's a green. My paint is green, so the green screen works kind of funny for me. So
Funny.
I can see that, and that's it for me.
Okay.
All right, Alex.
Mark, first I want to say thanks for the show a couple weeks ago.
That was glad you were here and got to experience that show. It was a lot of fun. Those guys really got their shit together.
Yeah.
Abel Gans.
Music's not really my scene, but it was good to see everybody.
Yeah.
So my choice, I'm going to do 2 things real quick. I got Art Zoid, Les Espaces Inquiet, which is pretty much the same as Ian. Thanks, Ian. And it was, I didn't listen to it when it was released. I didn't listen to it till the 90s, but it's definitely a great release. And it takes a couple of listenings to get into, but I thought it was really involved and really good, as everything that they do is. Yeah. It's never that simple, and you always have to listen to it a few times to really get it. But what I wanted to mention is I'm part of a male group, the Sean McPhee male group, and there's a gentleman named Richard Pinhas.
Great guy.
Pardon?
Great guy, great musician.
Yeah, and he did this album in '82 called L'Ethique, which I like quite a bit, is quite good, and he's going to be in town in September or October. I think it's October. But those of us in the email group heard that he was doing some traveling, and that he wasn't going to be too far away. So we actually were able to talk him into coming over here in Chicago. So I'm going to go see that. I don't know if Louise is interested in that, but
yeah,
he does pretty much the minimal electronics with guitar sort of thing,
it's
and I really enjoy it.
Wall of Noise industrial guitar. It's very good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good, but it's a certain taste.
Yeah, he played at the Rock and Opposition Festival one year, and he was on at like 1 a.m, and it was this wall of noise at 1 a.m. It was really stunning.
But he was in a band called Helden in the 70s, which I loved. Standby was my favorite album that they did. So he's been around for a long time. So, and that's it for me.
All right. My last choice again wasn't the first time I got into the first album I got into them was back in 1993 in Los Angeles at the first prog fest that Greg Walker
Mm.
and I don't know what else it was that they put on over at the UCLA Royce Hall. And originally it was supposed to be a 2-day festival, but for some reason it got shrunk down to a day. And so I guess he had to pick and choose which bands to do. And one of the bands was IQ.
Aha.
And they just put out their album Ever.
Mhm.
And I had a friend of mine that I went to that festival with, and he was saying, "Oh, you're gonna love this, guys." Okay, and I was like, going, "Okay, I've never heard of them before, but I kind of trusted my friend's ears." I said, "Okay," and when they were the most energetic of the bands there. I mean, uh, then the other band that was there that went on to be quite popular was Engelgard.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
And that was, I
like it.
believe that was their very first U.S. appearance.
Yeah.
And but going back to the IQ, I mean, starts off with a 20-minute epic, "The Last Human Gateway," and then it goes to one of the shortest songs I think of theirs, "Through the Corridors," which has a very kind of a punk quality to it. But it's busy. It's very busy for like a 2.5 minute song, and then that long title still can't remember that it was just like a little instrumental interlude, and it had possibly the longest title in IQ's catalog. Um, then their staple for that era, the Enemy Smacks, where uh, the singer goes through uh, his heroin addiction right on stage, and it's like, holy crap! I saw the video and I saw them doing that live, and I was just like in shock. I'd never seen a band do something of that caliber before, and I was just like, uh, I had the original version of it. Now this is their 30th anniversary set where they got a nice a DVD of it too, and again, just like the Marillion thing, it has the booklet with the lyrics in it if you wanted to follow it. Um, some of the songs that Peter Nichols lyrics are very hard to understand where he's coming from. I think he's not so much of a literal type of lyricist. He's more of like an abstract lyricist, and this is a great one. I mean, again, it's like the same with that Marillion one. It's like it's just the beginnings of what they've done. I mean, of course, they had that reissue, 7 Stories into '98, which included the original mix, but because that one wasn't, they didn't really technically call that their first album. They were kind of going with this one. Um, but it's one of my favorites. I mean, I like all of the Peter Nichols era. I do like the Paul Manel era stuff too. It's kind of different, kind of doing what Marillion did, a different singer, even though Paul's voice was kind of in the same caliber as Peter's, but a little bit more. Uh, I'm going to say a lowered register of
Okay,
sort. So they were trying to do something different, and I mean, that second album that they got on with Paul, and they were on Polydor, and they had Terry Brown producing it. You know, they were on. They, I mean, I spoke with Paul Manel, and he said they were on the verge of becoming really, really big. Like, you know, the same way as Marillion got really big, they were going to be that. But for what, just for some reason, it just didn't happen. And then they got Peter back, and they went, you know, I guess some people say got back on track to where they were supposed to go. And they're one of those bands that evolve album to album. So, on to you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, my next album is another Canadian band. Never Surrender by Triumph. Well, what can I say? It's one of those classic albums with, you know, the Rick Emmett, Michael Levine, Gilmore trio. It's one of their rare albums where it was not a song-oriented album. It was kind of a, you know, you listen to it as a whole and it sounds great, but there are absolutely no standout tracks on it. There are no singles. I can't even tell you a song that's more popular than any other on it. It's aside maybe from the actual title track, which is actually very forgettable. It never reached the you know, the level that the previous album did, but yeah, it was still playing quite a bit when it was released in Canada, and you know, on the radio and stuff. And well, it had to make my list because, well, it's my Canadian entry along with Saga.
Right.
There you go.
All right.
On
All
to
right,
you,
Nick.
Gary.
Okay, so for
Oh,
my,
Gary.
yeah, I think I was,
I was gonna say,
my final one, you know, I came at it sort of backwards. You know, I mentioned that I'm a huge Sabbath fan, so I was obviously like the Dio era of Sabbath just as well as every other era of Sabbath. I also loved his stuff in Rainbow, but when he was doing his solo career, for some reason, I don't know if I was just sort of being a metal snob or what, but it was like everybody was into it and it was always on the radio, and I just kind of completely overlooked it and thought it isn't very good. And so years later, when I got a chance to see him live and I got to meet him, I sort of went back and, you know, checked out his catalog, and, you know, the very first album, Holy Diver, my God, what an album. That, I
Throw
think
up
that's
the
probably
horns.
one of his two best solo albums.
Yo,
That's awesome. Love
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, that's great. I'm actually meaning, I have the CD right in my you know, and I want to get that remix one that they did. I believe it was last year or something like that, where it's like I think it's like a box set.
Mhm.
You know, I want to pick that one up because that, again, you know, like you said, I mean, I almost picked that too, but I figured I want to stick with the ones that I played more, and you know, but yeah, that's a great album.
had a great lineup, and especially like Jimmy Bain, you know, from, wow, what a great bass player. Definitely one of the great unknown bass players.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All right, Ian. I mean, Nick,
No,
you're
Nick.
up.
All right, my last one. Before I say my last one, I want to say thank you, Ron, for hosting
problem.
this
Oh, you're welcome.
and inviting me. It's definitely an honor to be here among so many amazing prog heads. Even though my picks have not been, I haven't picked anything really progressive. I guess the Police is probably closest to progressive that I picked. Yeah, probably.
We'd all like to second the words about Ron inviting us and doing this.
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
Thanks, Ron.
it's always fun.
And as I said, I really love crooners, right? I mean, I just love someone that has that voice that just kind of sucks you in.
Right.
And the next one is a band fronted by a great crooner by the name of Brian Ferry.
Uh-huh.
And the band is Roxy Music.
Mhm.
Now, this is called The High Road. It was a live EP.
Oh yeah.
Really, the critics were not fond of this album. In fact, a lot of people, it totally went unnoticed. Only featured 4 tracks, only clocked in at 25, almost 26 minutes. But I'll tell you, for 26 minutes, it had more music than I've heard from double and triple albums by some of the greats. It just seemed like it was just jam packed. Had two cover tunes on here. One by John Lennon, which was "Jealous Guy,"
Yeah.
and "Like a Hurricane" by Neil Young, which
Oh,
was
good track.
both of those tracks were really big on. It got a lot of airplay. I don't know if they did really well. I know that the EP reached number 26 in the UK album charts, number 5 in Canada, but it really didn't do a lot in America.
No.
I really found that very sad because I thought it was just a great interlude in between albums for Roxy Music,
Right.
which to me were great art rock, progressive rock, some
Glam
people
rock.
new wave, but
Glam
I don't
rock.
think I'd never heard the new wave in that band. But anyways, that's my final one, and that's all I've got to say other than thank you.
Oh, you will.
Good.
All
Okay.
right.
My last one is not going to be a crooner. I'm going with Motorhead. Another perfect day.
Yeah, there you go.
No.
It's
Not Ian.
Motorhead.
Not Ian.
It's not Motorhead's best album by far, but it's the album Motorhead released in 1983, and it's a Motorhead album, so it's a Motorhead album. Fast Eddie Clarke had left halfway through the previous tour, and they had to bring in Brian Robertson from Thin Lizzy as an emergency guitarist to finish out the tour, and they brought him in to do this album, thinking he would stay, but the chemistry was terrible. It's the only album that he's on, but it's not a bad album. It was pretty kicking in '83 for what metal was. They were one of the heavier bands out there. So that's my last choice for you of the 5 for '83. Motorhead, Another Perfect Day.
But
All right, Mark.
Okay. Well, I got the most controversial one here. It's maybe one of my least favorite David Bowie albums, but I have Let's Dance out here because I really felt like here's a guy that reinvents himself admittedly every year and a half. He did so here, and it's probably my least favorite incarnation of him. But when I find out that China Girl is co-written by Iggy Pop and that Stevie Ray Vaughan is on lead guitar, and I have an affinity for it, and I think you couldn't have some of the albums that preceded it, like Outside and Earthling and what was the one reality I really liked, and Black Star, without this album. I think I picked it because I wanted to just remind everybody how many times this guy reinvented himself successfully and became and was irrelevant all the way up to his death, which he died 3 days after Black Star was released, something like that.
Yeah.
So
he was the definition of progressive.
yeah, right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was just amazing, I thought.
Oh yeah,
and-
definitely.
And
I never
speaking,
bought any of his music, but I always liked what I've heard.
Right.
have you heard the Iggy Pop version of China Girl?
No, I've not.
It's similar but different.
Okay.
I
I
mean,
can't imagine. I
can imagine,
being
yeah.
David Bowie.
right.
yeah,
So-
I just had to hear, because when I saw that, like I said, co-wrote it, I was like going, wait a second, let me read about this. And I saw he did it.
Too.
I think on the Lust for Life album, I believe a few years prior.
Right.
And actually, no, I think it was in the late 70s, his thing.
Well, the
So-
other thing I liked so much that David Bowie did that Miles Davis used to do is he played with everybody.
Right. And
Yeah, I don't think he had the same band twice.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
This
if he
band was
did-
all in New York, by the way. They're all guys he must have met while he was traveling around New York, because I'm looking at these people here, and it's like Nile Rodgers on guitar, and the engineers, even the packaging and design is Getty McGaggerty, all from New York area, you know.
Yeah, and he had his different eras where he was in different cities throughout the world.
Right.
Right. And Stevie Ray Vaughan was actually the guitarist for the tour, for a couple of tours for him, including that album and one other one.
Yeah, he was on Let's Dance.
Okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you watch the video, you see that Stevie Ray Vaughan is playing in the doorway.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, Alex.
Okay, my last one is Shadow Fax Shadow Dance.
Oh, great album. Oh my God. Great unknown band.
Now, I'm still friends with G.E. Stinson, who's a guitar player on Facebook, and he's still doing music. But they got tagged, I think, incorrectly as New Age.
Yeah,
It really started off as Mahavishnu-esque fusion. That first album, Watercourse Way, is really smoking. I think is a great album, but the vinyl, the CD version, they changed some of the mix, and it's not nearly as good. But I think they were still putting out good music at this point. Some of it was a little more, I would consider like spoken word with something behind it. Sort of made it a little experimental, but more interesting. And Greenberg, who was the leader of the band, he was the reed player, passed away very young, which was sad. But they have, I don't know, 9 albums, 10 albums or so. And I liked all of them, all the way to the end of them. I thought they were good, and I thought they were not New Age.
Yeah.
So that's it for me. And Ron, thanks again for inviting me.
Okay, Alex, you said you were going to say something.
I already talked about Richard Pinez.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, 1983 was a pretty cool year, and obviously with all our choices, I mean, we're basically all over the map, so to speak.
You can count on Ian and I having similar tastes.
Oh, of course.
Yes,
of course.
me and Alex are in the same corner.
Yeah, and I mentioned it, in our chat. On July 1st, I've been thinking about this for a long while. It could be, we'll go with the number 5 again. Obscure or one-off albums.
You're asking for trouble with that with me. I've got hundreds of them.
I got a few, maybe a couple dozen, but I narrowed it down to 5. But I may change it again. It just depends on if I start remembering, stuff that I hadn't listened to for maybe over a decade or two, that when it first came out, or I mean, I found a lot of that in the 90s.
Right.
Stuff going back, a few decades, and got stuff at that time that was, when we had that, I guess you want to, I heard someone call it the third wave of prog.
Third wave, yeah.
Where that big explosion right about 93, and it just kind of right up into at the end of the 90s. And I mean, there was a lot of great albums, but then there was even more awful albums. I mean, where they were, I mean, I think any musician who was out there, they were pumping out even demo quality albums that sounded, I mean, when you go back to listen to them in 2023, they sound very dated for a 90s band, and sometimes even more dated than something from the 70s. And I used to buy a lot of stuff blindly, and then almost instantly selling them off, because and also that was the one of the big eras of the clone,
Yeah, the clone.
where I call it the Anderson Gabriel clone.
Oh, that club. I see.
Yeah,
I thought that about dance clubs.
Yeah, no, the Anderson Gabriels, everybody had to sound like those two.
Yeah.
And I mean that's nice if you're doing a nod to the past, but go forward.
Mhm.
That's
Well,
all.
the thing that's so interesting about the one-offs is a lot of them were transitional. Bands moving, say, from prog into fusion or vice versa or whatever. And
Right,
that always was interesting when they were fighting with themselves as to what they really wanted to do.
right, yeah. Without going into things, it's just there's a lot of labels. For instance, Laser's Edge that put off these one-off albums that this band just put out one album and obviously sales weren't great, so then they just disbanded and never to be heard from again. And then it took some of the big festivals like the aforementioned Prog Fest, and then on the East Coast, Near Fest and Prog Days took those type of festivals, and later on the one that Robert did. It takes those kind of festivals to kind of bring back these bands that have been dormant for decades,
Right.
to new, new ears or a refresher, that say, hey, yeah, I had that album back in 19 whatever, and it's been a while since I listened to it. For the vinyl heads out there that they had that and maybe they either lost the vinyl or loaned it out to someone, or it broke, or they sold it, for whatever reason, but it's like,
So what's the criteria? If they've played a festival, is it considered not, in my mind, that are not unknown at that point?
How unknown do you want to go?
Exactly.
well, no,
Figure
some of
if they played at the RIO Fest, they may not be known at all.
Right. But what about Nearfest? I mean, I got one that played Nearfest, and I'm like, because I've got like 20 already without even thinking. So I'm like, anybody that played Rozfest or Nearfest is out. I'm not gonna consider them.
you can go with that criteria. I
Okay.
mean, I was only mentioning those festivals. Those festivals kind of
Yeah.
pick some of those albums. I mean,
Right.
it could be, you can have, when I say obscure, it's just basically not so much in the Alex Ian realm of,
Right.
but
Eclectic.
something that no one else except for a select few people may have heard of.
Right.
And then one-offs are, obviously that's pretty self-explanatory, that a band just did one album and then just disappeared into the ether.
Right.
There's hundreds of Italian. Hundreds.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking of French Zool bands.
That's
those
even better.
Of French
Even
Zool
better.
bands.
Speaking of the comebacks, one that really blew me away that I saw a post on Facebook the other day was Petra. Is it Petra?
Petra?
The Christian
Petra.
prog band?
Yes.
They're back. They're doing a tour,
Yeah, 50th
or at least a few
anniversary.
shows.
I think was it a 40 or a 50th anniversary?
50th, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing, all these bands that I'm sure, if I can't say, I'll speak for myself, that when you think of these bands, you think of them when you first heard them, and then all of a sudden 50 years later, they're that old.
Well, I think what happens is some musicians, the reason they only do one album or maybe a couple and disappear, it's not necessarily because of sales, but because they decide that they want to raise a family. Then they got, so they have to get a real job, and then now they're raising kids, and then they got to put the kids through college, and at a certain point, all the kids are growing up, unless people in the band all do it at different times, but most people do it around the same age and stuff. And I think what's happening there's a big resurgence in the prog community, especially of bands coming back and releasing albums that hadn't done an album or a tour in many, many years. And it's because their kids are grown up, they're out of college, they're on their own, and the fathers or mothers, they can now get back with their friends and do what they love doing. I don't even think it's really relegated to prog, but I definitely see it in the prog community more than anywhere else.
Right, right.
Well, the band members, they have to agree on how much to rehearse, how much to write, how much to tour, how much, so they have to have all those things aligned. Otherwise it's dead. So it's not just making albums that everybody has to prioritize the same amount,
You're right, 100%.
Yeah.
And when you're just, you've done a couple albums and now you have a girlfriend or you have kids.
Right.
It's really hard to get together and rehearse, or to dedicate so much time to it. So some bands will stay local and some will just kind of disappear and then resurface.
Right.
But it's great to see them. It's great to see the bands that are coming back, because some of them are not just coming back, but they're coming back with vigor. They're coming back with an attitude that they're better than they were. And sometimes they really are. I mean, they're really, really good. They bring a whole new game to the table because they've grown up. Their philosophy is different. Their spirituality is different.
Right.
The times have changed. So I think it's an exciting time for people that are coming back that haven't been around for 40 or 50 years.
Right, right. So, well, we gave the audience a big cliffhanger as to what's going to come, on July 1st.
Mhm.
I have a few shows in between then. June is kind of my lighter month, but July is going to be a heavy month, and trying to get August going and so on. But in honor of the year that I picked, 1983, this is episode 80.
Wow.
So
Nice.
it would have been a really good coincidence if it was E3.
Yeah. Yeah.
But 80, close enough. Close enough.
Right.
Pretty cool. Speaking of 1983, there are a few big bands that nobody talked about. I was surprised that nobody talked about Pink Floyd's The Final Cut,
Okay.
U2, War,
Or yeah.
That
Michael
was on my
Jackson.
list.
ZZ Top, Eliminator, Pyromania by Def Leppard, Frontiers by Journey, An Innocent Man by Billy Joel, Oh by John Cougar Mellencamp,
Yeah.
and Rant and Rave with the Stray Cats.
Yeah. Isn't that Michael Jackson? Wasn't Thriller #1 for 30 weeks that year? So.
Oh yeah, a lot of great
Yeah.
music. I mean, there's so much out there, for people. I want to say even of our generation and younger that if we missed it the first time around, there's so much music out there. You can't. I mean, nowadays you can catch things a lot quicker, with releases because of the internet. Your mailing lists, social media. You can, you get maybe a more success rate of getting the album out when they are actually released as compared to 30, 40 and beyond years ago when, and you've probably missed a lot of music that came out in the 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and
I gotta go, Ron. Thanks for inviting me.
all right,
Had a great
thank
time.
you.
See you later.
All right.
One
Wow.
last about talk about stuff that we didn't talk about, which was a really biggie, which was the Starfleet project. Brian May.
Oh yes.
It was just released as a 40th anniversary box set today. I don't know. Okay. It's going to be released July 14th. That features Eddie Van Halen's on it, and Weasel Zappa's on it. I mean, it's. I was going to talk about it, but it
Never happened.
Well, hey, that was one. I was a big Queen fan in the early 80s and later on as well. But when I heard that one, I was like going, damn, this is cool. Brian
That's
May
a
and
great
Eddie,
album.
Eddie Van Halen, you know,
Okay, guys, I'm gonna get going
getting.
too.
All right. Well, I'm going to end this off right now, and
Okay.
stay tuned July 1st for I'll call it the obscure one-offs.
All right.
Okay.
I'll be
All right.
there.
I see it,
Be
everybody.
there.
Looking forward to that one.
Thanks, Ron.
All right.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody. Nice meeting